Hello everyone, and welcome to the Drop Table lecture. In this lecture, we're going to learn how to remove or drop tables from a database in PostgreSQL. So the syntax is actually really straightforward. If you want to remove an existing table from a database, you use the drop table statement as shown in the following below. So you're going to say drop space table. There's an optional if exists term, and then you input the table name. So that if exists term is an optional statement which will help you avoid errors if a table doesn't already exist in your database. So if you try to just say drop table, some table name, and that table actually isn't in your database, you'll get an error. If you say drop table if exists and then some table name, and even if that table is not in your database, you won't get an error out. So this is best shown by a couple simple examples in PostgreSQL. So I'm going to go ahead and hop over to a SQL editor from pgadmin so we can explore this just a little further. All right, so here I am at pgadmin. I've opened up a SQL editor. Let's go ahead and create a table real quick. We'll say create table, the name of the table. Let's go ahead and call this, we'll just say it's called test2. We'll name that. Well, let's go test2 like that. And it doesn't really matter what you name your table, as long as it doesn't already exist in your database. So we'll create this simple table. We'll have it have a column called test ID. Let's just make it a serial column and have it be the primary key of the table. Semicolon, run that. Looks like it returned successfully. So I'm just creating that table, test2, real quick. And now let's go ahead and just make sure it actually exists. We'll say select asterisk from, and it was called test2. Okay, so notice we don't get any rows back, but we do get that test ID column back, so we know that table exists. Let's go ahead and explore how to drop the table. So it's actually quite simple. The syntax for dropping the table again is just drop table and then the name of the table, test2. Now I'm going to go ahead and run that. So it looks like the query returns successfully with no result. So let's go ahead and make sure the table was actually dropped by saying select asterisk from test2, run that. Notice we get an error down here. So it says error relation test_2 does not exist, which makes sense because we just deleted or dropped that table from our database. So the drop table statement worked out perfectly. Now I want to show you what happens and how to use that if exists statement. So imagine I try to drop this table again. So the table's not in the database, so we should get some sort of error here if I just say drop table. So if I run that, I will get the error table test2 does not exist. So it'll give you an error back if you just try to drop the table. If you want to avoid getting this error, you can say if exists test2. And now if I run this query, it will say a notice instead of a full error. It'll give you a notice saying table test2 does not exist, skipping, and then it'll say query returned successfully. So it will execute the query, give you a quick notice telling you that the table doesn't exist, but it won't throw back an error. So if you have this sort of statement somewhere along in your code somewhere, you won't just disrupt your program, it'll keep on going. So again, that's drop table if exists. All right, that's basically it for the drop table. You can check out the documentation. There's another keyword that's actually already automatically input, but there's a keyword that you can put after your table known as restrict. And basically what restrict does is restrict refuses to drop the table if there's any object dependent on it. So PostgreSQL will use restrict by default. So just keep that in mind. If you want to remove this table that has dependencies on it and you want to remove the dependent objects together, you can put in the keyword cascade. We'll discuss cascade and restrict a little more because it depends a little more in like views and constraints than actual tables themselves. So just keep in mind, if you want to drop a table and your table has constraints or dependencies on, or other objects have dependencies on that table you're trying to drop, or it's used in some sort of view that we haven't actually discussed yet, but the view section is in a further section of this course, you can put in cascade. So by default, restrict will always be there. So you don't actually have to say restrict if you don't want to. Okay, so you can go ahead and explore the documentation for a little more info on cascade and restrict, but for right now, all you need to know for this section of the course is just say drop table if exists and then the table name. Okay, that's it for this lecture. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you at the next one.